Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Total Truth Show. And here on the Total Truth Show, we want to help you break free from the lies and propaganda of the mainstream media. All the disinformation and misinformation, we want to help you blast through all of that. And my name is Ken Kleinberg, coming to you all the way from the USA, San Diego, California.
And I'm Aldwyn Altuney, known as the Media Queen from the Gold Coast in Australia.
There is a great awakening happening in the world right now, and you're going to want to come along for the ride.
A lot of lies are coming to the surface. There's a lot of awakening happening. And as this awakening is happening, people realize they've been deceived for years. They've been lied to for years around all sorts of things. A lot of people have been blind to what has been going on in the world, and now they're starting to see. They're starting to see things in a different light.
Through our show, we want to raise global consciousness to quantum critical mass. And we don't want you just to accept the things that we're saying. That goes for our guests as well. We want you to do the research for yourself. Get out there and start questioning things. Start looking things up. Do the research. We want to pave the way for a new awakened world. And we want you to come along for the ride. So with that, let's get started, you guys. Let's dive into today's episode. Once again, welcome.
Yes, welcome to Total Truth Show episode 82. Oh my gosh, we're here already with my coach, Ken Kleinberg. How are you today, Ken?
I'm doing amazing.
Awesome. And we have Kaleigh Rogers with us today, all the way from Arizona. And we've got a hot topic, the truth about trauma. So a little bit about our amazing guest today. Now, Kaleigh has over a decade of experience. She is a trauma expert, has been on the front lines of America's mental health crisis, tackling addiction, suicide prevention, and trauma recovery. Her expertise spans domestic violence shelters, homeless shelters, addiction recovery, youth residential treatment centers, and equine therapy. With moxie and passion, she is a nationally certified traumatic stress expert and dynamic orator, bringing both frontline work and personal experience with complex post-traumatic stress disorder to audiences worldwide. She's spoken to hundreds of therapists, marketplace ministry, and at international expos for suicide prevention and trauma treatment. She's been committed to serving the underserved and as a lead in a local nonprofit, ensuring that people facing financial hardship or disabilities receive the care they deserve. You are loved and you matter, and cost should never be a barrier, she believes. Welcome to the show, Kaleigh.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited. Just seeing the intro again of all that you guys do with truth, it got me pumped up. Plus, it was good rock music, so I'm stoked.
Oh, awesome. Yes, Ken put a lot of work into that. Did a great job of that intro. Yeah, glad you like it. So, Kaleigh, tell us a bit of your background and why is trauma such a hot topic for you?
Oh, goodness. There's so many aspects to that. Thank you for asking, because there always is a backstory when it comes to things. Like, how did you land in all these fears? The short story is my life has been similar. I've experienced tremendous adversity, things that I didn't recognize were happening in my life. You know, you just think your life is the usual, right? It's just usual. That's how you go about things. And it wasn't until my 20s that I really could see that I was experiencing complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So a little different than just acute traumatic stress. So there's treatments that are effective for both, but also differentiation. So it was my personal walk first of trying to reconcile really difficult things and then also treat all the stress in my body.
Did you have an upbringing where there was trauma in your family or around you as well?
Oh, yeah. Great question. All throughout generations. So I actually didn't grow up in Arizona. I grew up in West Virginia in the United States. And so what you can picture is like the jungle. So not just like the forest, but like the jungle. And my ancestors had been there for many generations outside of my immediate generation. My paternal grandfather was in the military, but previous to a lot of different kinds of poverty, that's like the first line of trauma. So disadvantage in being able to get by. There was a lot of coal mining at this time in some of the generations past, and what they had was coal camps is what they called them. It's pretty much like indentured servitude because they would pay them in money that they could only use at the company store, and so they could never quite get out of poverty. So that was one of the surface level things, but there was abuse and emotional neglect that ran through many generations. I came to learn, and to me, this terminology most of the world may not think about, but I considered myself, kind of like this idea of white trash, right? I'm just like this poor girl. I'm never really going to be anything. I talk like this, and I didn't really expect big things. And I experienced some continued challenges throughout my lifetime. I can speak directly to those if that's okay. I always ask permission because, disclaimer warning, it's some tough stuff.
Sure. Well, I'd love to hear it. Thank you.
Yeah. So some of the first things was this experience of not feeling safe. Both my parents had also been traumatized, and God bless them. I love them, but they also weren't able to be fully emotionally present. So I was facing hard things in the world without having that safety net. And so my little kid mind was like, well, I need to be responsible. I need to take care of all the things. So already I'm cutting off some aspects of development in my brain. But my grandmother at this time, because of generational trauma, she survived an attempted murder from her brother. She got shot in the chest. He shot himself in the face. They both survived. But my mom realized it's probably a good idea to get out of here because my mom also relied on my grandmother. So that's how we kind of made our way to Arizona. But throughout after that, both of my parents experienced some continued adversities in their mental health. So I grew up around significant depression, really high intense anxiety, and it impacted me and my siblings along with other things. My siblings experienced a lot more bullying than I did. I almost can't even say that I experienced adversity in the school system because of how significant theirs was. And so then I watched my siblings both fall into different categories. One, severe addiction, overdose, a suicide attempt. He survived and is doing amazing now. And then my other brother, severe mental illness, addiction, some challenges. And unfortunately, we lost him not to suicide, but sudden death in 2022. So lots of things, but it doesn't even touch the surface of collective trauma. I know we briefly talked about that, like the collective trauma of watching our environment just get destroyed, or animal species get destroyed, or death of animals in our lives, and this loss of safety and grief. So there's all of that too, because like the two of you, I can see more of what's happening in the world and the truth of the reality of it. And I grieve that. I grieve that we have some really severely broken systems and some negative agendas and powers at play that are trying to continue to harm people and other things.
Yes, absolutely. We were just chatting actually before we went live. I was filling Kaleigh in on what's going on in Australia with the $1.2 billion federal government, the Australian government, $1.2 billion into poisoning Australia. And this poison, this ant poison that they've been sending to people's households with this brochure to say, put it in your yard, even if there's no fire ants. And this stuff doesn't just kill fire ants. This kills everything. It kills birds, dogs, horses, everything, right? So I was just sharing about what the Australian government's up to at the moment. And they're putting $10 million into brainwashing people about why this is such a good idea. And it's just like COVID all over again, right? It's like they create the problem and then they create the solution for the problem. And you've got to ask yourself, who is making money from this? Who is profiting from this? you've got to ask where, follow the money trail, as they say in the Thrive documentary. So yes, this can absolutely lead to traumatic situations for people where their pets are dying because they have now put poison in their yard that the government has recommended. In fact, they've mandated, because they're actually knocking on people's doors now with police officers, threatening to fine people $15,000 if they don't let them on their property to poison their property. So this is absolute coercion, like we saw through COVID, where they were saying you've got to get the jab, and then later they said, oh no, it was optional to get the jab. Oh no, you didn't have to get the jab. But if you don't get the jab, you just can't travel for 3 months, can't go into pubs or restaurants, can't work for a lot of people. Oh, but it was your
bed.
And now it's your choice to put this poison in your yard. And if your dog dies, it's your fault, or your cat dies, or birds die, it's your fault because you have now put it in your yard. So you have to wake up to this stuff. You got to get educated. Otherwise, you become like all the other sheeple out there. I say sheeple because people follow people, and people follow what they believe to be true from what they hear in the mainstream media, the propaganda. It is well and truly at play. And the people behind this stuff, they are evil people. This is full on like a satanic, the satanic forces with some of these elites that we see in this world, this realm that we're having in the current reality, this 3D reality. There's some very evil people at the heart of all this that love to see people suffer. And so this is where now the light forces, the spiritual workers, the ones that are, connected to God, whatever that looks like for you, the source of light is also there where there's darkness, the dark and light. It's a yin yang of life, right? There's always going to be dark forces, there's always going to be light forces. However, as we deal with this collective trauma of some really dark, evil crap going on out there, how are we going to bring more of our light out? How are we going to be able to deal with this collective trauma that is happening now? And I would love to hear from you, Kaleigh, what you've done to help overcome some of this trauma. And I'm really sorry to hear about what's happened to you or happened for you. I always say everything happens for us, not to us, even if we don't see it at the time. So here you are helping people with trauma, and you've got all that history with trauma. So what can people do if they know consciously they have some trauma, they're not quite sure how to deal with it, they're suffering mentally, they may be feeling depressed or angry or sad, and they just don't know how to come out of it? What would you say to them?
Oh, you nailed it on so many fronts. So many fronts. One, thank you for shining a light on what's actually going on in your community, because you're absolutely right. There are people in power and their agendas happening, and it's being pushed and pushed and pushed, and people aren't actually offered the freedom to make a choice. And that is also traumatic, because when you are in your community and you can't make free choices without really significant consequences, you can live in this significant state of fear. Your body breaks down, your mind isn't sure who to trust, what you can do. And so what a great question. What do we do when that happens? Now, each person is a little uniquely different. It's less of a checklist prescription when it comes to trauma. The other thing to consider is each individual person has different resiliencies in their nervous system, in their family unit. So someone that has grown up not feeling safe around any human and not having anywhere to turn will likely require other kinds of things to help them than someone that grew up with a foundational view of life, understands some of what's going on, has a good idea that they can be empowered, that they can tell the truth, even with consequences. They may require something a little different. But there are some core things for all sides. One is a true sense of belonging and connection. Our world tries to disconnect us in all the ways. It tries to keep us quiet. It tries to keep us believing shame. Same thing with the poison to the animals that's being pushed so hard in your community. It's, well, if people don't talk to each other, if they don't actually rally around support, well, then they have more power and control to do something that's not good. So someone that doesn't trust any human, and one of the prescriptions to heal is community, that's a whole other ball game. So that actually tends to be the people I work with the most. There's two areas of post-traumatic stress disorder in particular. Not everyone that experiences trauma develops this kind of experience. It's known throughout the world as a disorder, but it's not a disorder. It's an injury. So to heal an injury, it requires some specific things. If it's more of an acute trauma, there's a quicker formulaic things to treat the body. But if it's complex, it first starts in relationship. So if I have someone come to me and they say, I'm terrified to even talk to you because nobody in my life has been safe. Like the two people the world says I should trust the most hurt me, or my community itself, I couldn't walk out the door without fearing for my own life. We start with, okay, I'm not going to tell you to trust me, because how could I ask someone to do that? And we're just going to be with each other. We're going to engage in real conversation. We're going to start right where they're at. I'm going to listen. I'm going to hear. And in this, if their heart feels open and mind feels open, I might share some wisdom with them. I might say, guess what? You're not broken. The reason you have 10 panic attacks a day is because this is what's happening in your nervous system. And they go, what? Like, wait a second, I'm not broken. So to answer in a shorter way, first, it's community and a sense of belonging and connection. It's not hiding the truth, but being open about what's actually going on. It's treating the body and the nervous system in all the different ways, which I can talk about that as well. And then it's safe relationship, where we can shine a light on people's personal experience and alleviate shame, because shame actually increases suffering. When someone thinks they are bad and their life is never going to be anything, well, then why try? Like, why not be hopeless? And so we remove that and we say, you know what? Yes, some real things have happened. And likely these things have happened for you. And I've learned that in my personal experience. I'm not upset that I have experienced all of these painful things. I'm not upset about it, because to be honest, I wouldn't have known what it's really like to experience it. And it sure has made me a darn good therapist to really understand it and to have done my work.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, you shared some great wisdom there. And I think at that base too, self-care is so important. Self-nurturing, self-care. I've had 4 friends who've suicided by the age of 45. And with all those friends, what happened is they isolated themselves from others before they were about to kill themselves. Like basically for a month or so, at least beforehand, they just didn't want to see anyone. They stopped eating with some of them. They just totally isolated themselves. And I think a lot of people, when they go through trauma, they feel very alone. And they do go into this sort of shame and guilt, and they don't want to see people, and they feel that they're like, we can be our own worst enemies with the conversations we have with ourselves.
Yes.
And I think it's so important for people to realize that they're not alone, that there is a collective trauma going on right now, especially since COVID, but really since the beginning of time, we've had these evil forces that have been, even back to the Roman times. And, we've had evil forces in the world for years, right? And now we have different communication methods, thank God, that we can actually get different information out there. Imagine once upon a time when we were relying on, even not so long ago, 20 years ago, relying on just the newspaper and TV and radio, and one agenda being pushed the whole time, and brainwashing and shaming that happens. Like it was the same through COVID. If you didn't get the jab, oh, shame on you. You're making the community sick by not getting the jab, and all this kind of business. Like there was so much of that being dumped on people. And now, of course, we've seen so many heart attacks since then. We've seen so many side effects. It's all coming out because the truth always comes out in the end. The truth always comes out in the end. And I know Ken's got something to say about this. I'm going to hand over to Ken.
I could definitely become a fire hose if I go too far into that. But I just, I think when it comes to trauma, I think because, I know to a level I experienced some of that in my own childhood. And, one of the ways that I experienced it was in the school system. So I went through a school system at a time in my life where I was legitimately, so everybody today, like they all talk about how everybody's like ADD, I'm ADD, da, 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 da. Well, I was legitimately ADHD as a kid, diagnosed like the genuine real deal, not just something that's being thrown out there. But it was at a time where the school system did not know how to deal with an ADHD kid. And I got shoved in handicap classes. I got shoved in mentally retarded classes. I got shoved everywhere. And literally when it came time to graduate high school, and I finally did graduate. Luckily, I graduated because I had enough credits. I graduated at a time where some laws weren't in place yet. So I actually ended up, thankfully, graduating, and I never passed a science class, never took foreign language, never passed algebra. But I was able to graduate because I had enough credits. It was the best thing that could have happened to me, finally getting out of that environment, finally getting out of that. Second best thing that happened to me, the last 2 years of being in high school, so it happened to be in 10th grade, is the year I got saved in 1992, Wednesday night, September 2nd at around 9:30 at a Christian camp called Hume Lake. That was the second best thing that happened to me around that time. But when I graduated high school, like, there's a lot of people that stay in contact with some of, the old school people. I maybe had one or two people that I stayed in contact with. The rest of it, I was just like, I don't even want to. I don't even care. High school reunions, I never went. I just did not care. I just wanted to detach from that entire thing. And, other things, in my own childhood, I was never really close to my dad. Shortly after I became a Christian, it's like, instead of growing closer, I actually grew further away in distance, because I actually ended up seeing more clearly who he really was and who his character was really based around. And it was just kind of like, he was more of the person like, do as I say, not as I do, horrible example, well, yeah, I mean, I'm going to say that, hypocrite, and it just, about a year ago, he finally died. And what was funny about that is I actually sat there for a little while, for a couple weeks, expecting to feel something, like thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm in shock and I don't even know I'm in shock. Maybe this and that. Nothing. I had no feelings of remorse, no feelings of missing him, no feelings of, I regret not being able to see him on his last days. None of that. Because what had happened to me is I had literally detached him out of my heart. I had disowned him in my heart and mind as my father. I literally disowned him and can completely detach from that. So when his death did come, it really didn't affect me, because that's now kind of where I'm leading up to. In the last year to year and a half, I have just recently started to dig down into some of the issues that I know that I see. And part of that is through other masterminds I've been through and different things like that. Some of it had a lot of it involving like the subconscious and dealing with a lot of that. And, kind of reopening some of those wounds and giving them actually a chance to heal. That's actually been a phenomenal journey. And through that journey, God's connected me with unbelievable people that have helped me. I'm, connected with some men through the Wild at Heart ministry. I don't know if you've heard of that, Kaleigh, Wild at Heart ministry. And that would be a long story. I'm not even gonna. But anyhow, it's a really good organization, and some, a lot of the language that they use, I resonate with, because in my childhood, I lost a lot of what does masculinity look like, because I never had that example. And so now the journey that God's got me on is learning to attach myself to him, not only as my dad, but as the example on where on what masculinity looks like. And I do have to admit something else I'll share, and then I'll shut up because I'm taking the spotlight here and I don't want to take your spotlight, Kaleigh. Something else I'll share. It's really interesting that it happened about roughly 6 months ago, where I went to go try to communicate through prayer. I was on the way to the gym and I was praying in my car, and I was trying to communicate through prayer and just, call him my dad. And I recognized that when I said that phrase in that prayer, there was a drawback inside of me. There was literally a place inside of me that was hesitating, calling him my dad, because I had such a disconnect. And I've since then just leaned into that more because I'm seeing that as a way God is revealing himself to me in a way I've never really latched onto before with him. And I'm leaning into that in a way to where I am fully and 100% seeking him to be my masculine example of a dad. And it's been an amazing journey. There's still healing to go and to happen inside, but that's just kind of an example of a journey. And I don't even know if I've shared this on the show before, but that's just an example of the journey I've been on, and with God. And the other last piece that I'll share here, the other interesting thing about a lot of this internal change and a lot of this really deeper interaction with God and my dad, my heavenly father, the deeper interaction actually started about a year ago when I started asking him, how do I make you more part of my brand? How do I incorporate you in what I do as a mastery weight loss coach in my brand? And then he just began to, I just watched him open up the floodgates. I watched him open up. He brought me a faith-based coach. He's brought me other people that I can latch on to. He's just been providing in such a way. So with that, let me conclude this whole story with this and just say, I want to speak to anybody listening that has some crazy trauma going on in their life, maybe some healing that you need to have happen. You're going to go through the process, but you can choose to go through the process of healing and being a Christian and not really asking him into that process, literally. And that's kind of what I did at the first start of my brand and company, Mastery Weight Loss, is I developed my brand. I did all the business things, all the professional things behind the scenes. And I was still a Christian. I still had my devotions. I still had prayer time and all that other stuff, but I would never really asked him in. And so, I mean, you can do that and sure, you'll heal and everything else. But I'm going to really encourage you, the journey you're on to healing, invite him into that. Invite him into that because you have no idea what you're missing. When you invite him in and you welcome him in to show you who he is and what he wants you to do, it's going to be an entirely different journey. So with that, I'm handing it back over to you, Kaleigh.
Can I say that you are literally witnessing to the power of looking at your life through the lens of truth, doing the hard work to look at the wounds and to put healing salve. Like the power of what you just said to encourage other people is proof of that. So like end of show, done. Like perfect. No, I'm just kidding. I have so many things I want to comment on. My mind, like there's like 10 things you said that I'm like, oh my God, yes. So I'm gonna slow it down in my mind just a little bit. And one of the first things that you mentioned kind of as it interweaved with your story, which by the way, thank you for sharing. There's power in our stories. Like when we're honest in storytelling throughout millennia, it helps us see what's really going on and be able to offer support to other people. So like, thank you for talking about things that it sounds like you haven't talked about here before, so that the people that really support and know you and love you, and even first-time listeners, they see your heart and they know your journey. And so they know that when you say something, like you've walked the walk and talked the talk. Okay, but anyway, you said this idea of masculinity and growing up and having a dad, but a dad that was not what would be defined as a healthy dad. And what I find with men and women, kids and people all the way up through their 80s, they have this experience of, I don't think I can trust a God or God, especially if there's a masculine energy to it, because of the experiences I've had with other males. So I want to ask, like, how did you do that? Like, how did God take you on that journey from this is the example you were given, and then you feel safe to draw near to a heavenly father? Like, how did that happen?
Just through God opening up different avenues and people for me to connect with, that then gave me a further space to be able to share some things in my life that maybe I haven't shared with anybody before. There's some things that I thought I would take to the grave with me, that I've shared with certain individuals. And so it's and just opening that up finally, you know. I think part of it is like there's some parts of that journey where I was for the longest time scared to share, and I don't know why, but I was scared to share. And but just I really don't know a lot of the details on how, like, I don't remember too much, you know, over the last year and a half on exactly how it happened. I just know it kind of fell into place. It did. I got connected with somebody. One of the places it started at was, and Aldwyn, you remember we interviewed her on the show, Anna Berger, with the Subconscious Mind program. And so that's
Yes.
one of those places that, interesting enough, the healing started, and the journey kind of began because when I was on my coaching calls with her, she opened up such a space on those calls that made me feel safe in a way I've never felt before with anybody else. And so I shared with her things that I've never shared with anybody else before. No one. And still today, I'm even very, very selective on who I share that with. And it's a very slow process. I'm starting to kind of open up and share it with more people. And from there, that's when, so that's actually part of it. So that's when, after hearing my story and really diving deep with me and the subconscious, and she's got a whole program to help you reprogram your subconscious, everything. And it's amazing. It actually is really amazing. But she referred me to a ministry, Wild at Heart Ministries. And I've known about the book Wild at Heart by John Eldridge. And so she recommended the book for me first, and I got the audio book and I listened to it, and I was just like, and it's totally Christian based. And I listened to it and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is my language. I resonate with this in such a major way. He was talking about masculinity and he was referring it to God and how God created us, like, as men, as he created in us like a wild heart, you know, kind of like, yeah, you know, just wanting to go to battle. You know, it's like even as a kid you're just like playing with dinosaurs and fighting things and doing different things and going on adventures and different things. That's the kind of heart that he meant for us to have. And so as I got further into the audiobook, I just started resonating. And then I think on a few sessions down the line with Anna, she recommended to start looking into Wild Heart Ministries. And she says that they often have retreats and different things like that. So I went to their website one day and I found this little thing called what they called campfires. And so apparently they've got little ones like that all around different areas and stuff. Well, I found one near my area and I reached out to the guy on the website and he called me back and I got a chance to share with them and everything. So we actually had a few sessions by ourselves. So I went over to his house and we just chatted it up, talked, and I had a chance to share with them a lot of in-depth stuff. And then it eventually formed into, now we've got like a group where we meet every second Tuesday of every month. And it's just a men's group. And that's kind of the atmosphere we're all seeking, is a men's group for accountability and different things like that, in a way that a lot of people have not found in other churches, unfortunately. And so that's kind of how the whole journey started. And then through that, you know, God curating inside of me, God, you know, just continuing to open up. That's then eventually where the conversation came in, Dad, you know, and then me kind of shrinking back going, whoa, what's that? And then God bringing that to light, saying, let's work on that together. And so that's kind of, yeah, that's the story.
Thank you, Ken. I know it's a deep question.
That wasn't. I had to really work to remember what were all the pieces of that. And it finally started coming together. So.
Yeah. Well, you brought up several things that I'd love to reflect so that, the people that are watching and that have also experienced you can see some of these elements that you talked about. One was your willingness to go and lean into some of the pain, because typically we're biologically designed to go the opposite direction of pain. We put a hand on the hot stove and we immediately want to remove it because it hurts. And yet in that moment, your willingness to lean in to vulnerability and pain and say, okay, I'm going to sit with this beautiful coach. She feels safe enough to connect with at least once. And then I'm going to allow myself to be in this process. And it's such a beautiful process. You're describing that willingness and, dare I say, surrender to being safe with another person and to allowing them to share it. It sounds like Anna, was that her name?
That was her name. And what's funny about that? My first call with her, I didn't go into that expecting that was going to happen. It just kind of happened. She had asked me enough questions that led me down that path, and it just kind of naturally happened. I was not planning on that. I was not ready for that. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I even doing here in this conversation right now? I could not believe it. That's kind of how it happened.
Yeah. I've watched people get to that moment and they back up, and sometimes they flee for good, quote unquote, but they flee because it's like too close to really allowing yourself to be held by another person emotionally. So there was this, once you got there, this like I'm here, and you could have like totally booked it. I watched the same with animals. Is it okay to also talk about trauma with animals? Again, disclaimer warning.
Yes,
so
yes,
people know we kind of already talked about it a little, but
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
Perfect. So
Anything
one of
goes.
the spaces I lean into, which is a backstory as well with horses. I did not grow up with horses. I grew up with other animals, but not horses. So it was strange to me that around 2018, I had this deep pull to get around horses. I'm like, why? I totally understand now why. It helped me significantly in my healing, and then has also really launched holistic therapies here in Arizona with horses that have also experienced trauma. A lot of people in the horse world actually never come in contact with horses that have experienced trauma or the residual impacts of being traumatized. Most of those horses end up in the kill pens because their owners go, oh, they have behavior problems, they want to buck all the time, or they're aggressive. So they go from hand to hand to hand to hand, just like a foster care kid. And then they end up in the kill pen. So the horsemen that I work with tend to work also with those horses. So like the people and the horses experience the same things. And there was a time when I was watching this horse, one of the first sessions I got to experience. Its name was Tango. So you can imagine it was like high energy, high anxiety horse. And it was just booking it. It was so stressed out. And in 15 minutes, with the safety of the horsemen and modalities that really offered nurturing and direction and healthy leadership, a lot like what you're talking about with Anna, this sequence of questioning that got you to this place of, wow, okay, so now I'm in an open discovery place. The horse in this time actually walked through and said yes, and its body relaxed and its mind let go. It allowed physical touch, and from then on, it was never the same, right? Its healing journey continued from them because its body now recognizes, oh, I can let the anxiety go. I can be safe with another person. So you and this horse, Tango, experience that willingness and that surrender. This past Monday, actually, we were working with another horse. This horse has really only been hands-on with one horseman. Similar, a Mustang, 8 years old. Mustangs here in the United States tend to be the horses that are like the free rein horses. They weren't domesticated in recent years, so they have a lot of freedom. There's challenges that happen. And so what they tend to do is they call the horses out, meaning they chase them with helicopters, they get them in pens. There's a lot of traumatization that happens in that process. And then they end up not trusting humans. And unfortunately, that then leaves them in even more vulnerable places. So whatever this horse's story was, I'm not sure. And again, the horseman isn't fully sure. It had come off a reservation up in northern Arizona. And essentially her name's Rain, She will not let the fortress around her heart go. She's not aggressive, and she's a strong horse. Like, she can do all the horse things, no health issues. When we see in people that have chronic exposure to trauma, there's a lot of breakdown that happens, autoimmune disorders, chronic tension in the body. I digress, lots of things. Anyway, so Rain, relatively healthy horse, and could do so many things. Like, she has an actual purpose. But we're watching her on Monday, and they're in the process of what's called the laydown. And typically, rough and tough cowboys in the laydown will force a horse to lay down, or in some other Native American communities, they'll starve the horse until the horse is tired enough that the laydown can happen. That's not how we work in the programs that we work in. And so there's this natural back and forth of helping the horse be willing and safe enough to trust the horseman that it can lay down. And horses know how to lay down, like from birth. They know. And yet for her, because the horseman is with her and instructing her into something vulnerable, she would not let it go. And so 2 hours go by, she won't let it go. And I got the picture today, which I was so excited for at this conference I was at, of her just chilling, laying down after the process. And so to kind of share a little bit, like what you're talking about, Ken, Rain in that situation with a safe person would have been led up to this moment of breakthrough, and is still shielding her heart and is still scared. It's not a lot of people would look at horses or other people like that as they're resistant, or they don't want to heal, or they don't want relationship. And that's not it. There's this fear of, well, what if I am fully vulnerable, or what if I surrender to this process? What's actually going to happen? Like, thank God Anna was wonderful in the process, and thank God this horseman is great with this horse. But there's so many, like, our listeners and us, the three of us, we've experienced things where we are scared to let it go, and we're scared to get to the moment of surrender. And I've seen the same in my own life.
Wow, that's such a moving story there, Kaleigh. I just really took me back to when I was a kid, and I used to love horses, and we had this big horse picture in our living room, and I just always loved horses. I loved that it was a picture of some horses running, and the freedom of horses. And I actually feel the collective trauma of animal cruelty that has happened over many generations. As you were sharing, I was feeling for these horses. And it's interesting. We were talking about our cats. We all have cats, and I rescued a cat 15 or 16 years ago that died a year ago. Tiger. He had an amazing life, beautiful pretty cat. He had an amazing life for 15 years, and then he died, and I took on another rescue cat, and I felt this anxiety, and I felt this stress with both cats. And it took a good year or so to really give them so much love, to be able to pick them up and hug them. Like, even my cat now, Pablo. There's Pablo here, a little picture of Pablo. Even Pablo now, he doesn't like to be held for too long. I can still feel a little bit of anxiety with him. I've got to be so gentle with him. It's really interesting. However, with enough love, with enough patience, we can help turn the trauma into triumph, I guess, really. We can turn things around. The question is, how much patience do you have with yourself or with animals? How many people would not have this patience and would just go, oh, it's a difficult animal, just put it down. It's like I had possums that I had a mother possum here for many years that had quite a few babies, and I was feeding the possum and I was looking after the possum. And then one day the possum had a little bit of sort of redness around the eye, and I didn't think too much of it. I thought, oh, it looks like it's just scratched itself. And I went away for a few weeks and came back, and I had, other people looking out for the possum, but the possum had a baby on its back at this point, and the redness got quite a bit larger on the possum's eye. And I called up Wildcare and I said, look, the possum's got, it's quite red around the eye. And they said, oh yeah, that's normal. That's just a kind of like a dermatitis. It's a little skin condition that possums get sometimes. They said, what we'll do is we'll come and trap the possum, and we'll take it down to Currumbin Wildlife Hospital, and we'll go and give it some antibiotics, and then we can, get the possum back to you with, after that. And so what happened is we had the trap out a few times to see if we could capture the mother. And what ended up happening, it took maybe 2-3 nights by the time that they took the bait in the cage, and the mother and the baby went into the cage. And so we thought, okay, we'll leave them together, take them to Currumbin Hospital. Well, the next day I got a text message from the wild care lady saying, I'm so sorry, they've put the mother down because they said that it was too far gone, that they couldn't repair it, and because the possum couldn't close its eye, it was going to get other issues, and that potentially the dermatitis could pass on to the baby, and they killed the mother possum. I was so pissed off about it. And this is what we're dealing with every single time I have taken an animal which has been injured to a vet or to a animal hospital. Every single time they have killed the animal. And this is the thing, is that we're dealing with a culture that does not have patience. They probably think it's going to cost too much, it's going to take too long. Whereas I bet if the vet that put that possum down, if it was their child that had a bit of dermatitis around its eye, were they going to say to the child, oh, we'll just kill you now because you've got a bit of dermatitis on your eye? What I've realized, the best thing to do with animals that are injured, leave them be. Leave them exactly where they are. Nature will sort itself out, and I'm sure that would have just healed itself. I was so pissed off about that. So I have trauma around that. I have trauma around, because I felt bad then. I thought I was doing the right thing by that possum, taking it down to the Currumbin Wildlife Hospital, and then to find out that they killed this mother who I'd been looking after for years at my property here, because most of the houses in my street, they've chopped all the trees down. So I've created a sanctuary here where there's trees all around the place. I call it like my little tree house. And of course the animals come. When there's trees, the animals come back to nature. But of course we're in a time when there's development like crazy. We've got high rises going up left, right and center on the Gold Coast with the Development Friendly Council. And with all these high rises going up, of course, where are the animals going to go, right? There's trauma with the animals. We've had koalas turn up at the local 7-Eleven store. It's just insanity, right? Often koalas are getting hit under where it says beware of koalas, under the signs. You find koalas dead on the road because people driving too fast. They're not keeping an eye out. They're on their phone while they're driving or whatever. They're distracted. We're creating such a selfish society in general that, it's creating a collective trauma out there. There's a lot of social anxiety. There's a lot of issues with animal cruelty still. And I'm really happy to hear, Kaleigh, with your horse story, that thank goodness they had the patience with those horses to actually train them and to bring them back to some form of normality to deal with that trauma. We have a group here on the Gold Coast called Healing Hooves, and there's actually 10 horses that have been rescued, and like some of them have lost their sight or some of them got hoof issues, and they use these animals for healing. Healing Hooves, it's a really beautiful charity, and we did at one of our animal action events we did for horses one year. We raised funds for Healing Hooves, and they're the most beautiful horses, and it's a big issue. We all have, to some degree, some element of trauma, whether we're conscious of it or not. And as they say, hurt people hurt people. Hurt animals hurt other animals. However, I think at the heart of it all, I think essentially people, when we're born, I don't think we're born evil. I don't when people say, oh, psychopaths are born that way or sociopaths are born that way. I have trouble accepting that, because I think essentially, we're born beautiful and innocent and loving and open, and then we get shut down or we get traumatized by some external force. And then that has people and animals, behaving very differently potentially for the rest of their life until they get some kind of healing, until they get an awareness, a consciousness about it, and until they're willing to move forward, as Ken mentioned also with Anna Berger, and having a great coach and a mentor and doing the personal development work, looking inside out, turning yourself inside out. I've done landmark education. I've done a lot of different programs where I've turned myself inside out, and I continually turn myself inside out. I'm always looking at, okay, when I get triggered by something, as they say, when people get triggered, they're either going to fight, they're going to freeze, or they're going to run. Right? Sometimes we do a combination of a few of those things: fight, freeze, or run. And so it's a matter of getting conscious to, okay, what is it that I do when I'm triggered? Why am I getting triggered by that? there were a few things happened before this show. I started to feel myself getting a bit triggered, right? And I was like, well, that's interesting. Why am I getting triggered over this? Okay, so just actually just noticing why we get triggered, as in why do we get angry or sad or whatever it is, and how can we move forward in a more peaceful way? Because as you were saying, Kaleigh, shame is a huge thing. And when you look at Dr. Hawkins' scale of consciousness, if you look at the actual map of consciousness that Dr. Hawkins, a psychiatrist in the US, did, he wrote the book Power versus Force. Shame is at the very lowest vibration that we feel as human beings. They prove scientifically we're 99.9% energy frequency vibration. When we have shame, we're vibrating at 20 hertz. And then we have grief just above that, and guilt and grief, right? They're like 30 hertz, and anger is at 150 hertz. When we can come to peace, as the animals that were traumatized come to peace, come to love, these are the highest vibrations. At 524 hertz, we're at love. Joy and gratitude, 540 hertz. Peace is 600 hertz, and then enlightenment above that. Enlightenment, when we connect to source, when we connect to God, that's enlightenment. And that's when we have the most free-flowing, happy experience of life. People say, I just want to be happy. Well, how do you get happy? Is you shift your energy. You get conscious to where you have trauma in your life, and you deal with it, right? Without making yourself wrong about it or making anyone else wrong about it, because we know that those who are hurt others. Those who are healed heal others. And it's a journey. And I do believe everyone does the very best they can under whatever circumstances they're in. And so finding that forgiveness, that peace, that gratitude for the learnings, finding that within ourselves, I think is absolutely crucial. And so, Kaleigh, I'm curious, with your journey, with all the trauma you've been through, what was your journey as far as personal development or self-care? What are some practices that you put into place to help you deal with the trauma that you've had?
Oh, promise me we'll come back to this question, because one, I gotta say, I love hearing you speak. There was like wisdom nugget in like 10 different significant areas. And also, like, Zena loves you. This is Zena.
Hey,
She
Zena.
very much crawled up here and was like, I'm a part of the show today, which we welcome, because animals deserve a moment in the spotlight. And she's a perfect example. We briefly talked about her story. She was the runt of the litter, literally in the box at Walmart. And I'm glad they let her survive. I mean, it was already hard enough. She's full grown and still little. And the best thing ever, like, I adore her. She's of all the rescue animals that I've rescued over my whole life, she will crawl under the blanket and put her head here and sleep. And I'm like, it just makes me fall in love. And I want to go all the way back to when you were talking about the free horses. There's the same for us as humans, where we yearn to be able to do that in a herd, in a natural environment. And there's so much death. There is. And when you said trees, like, my soul just cries. Trees are magnificent. Like, you ever sit with your back just to a tree and you're like in relationship with a tree? That's something I do for self-care, by the way, is I just sit and I lean up against a tree and I take off my shoes and I'm like actually there in the present environment. So as you're saying this, there's so much grief that happens individually in our lives and in our homes and with our animals, and then outside in our herd, in our community, and across. Like, I've never been to the Gold Coast. I have no idea the devastation that's happening there in these different ways. And yet I feel your heart and I feel grief on those deep levels. And I'm so glad we're talking about that, because a lot of times when we talk about trauma in conversations, sometimes we only talk about the abuse and neglect and the accidents and the natural disasters. We don't talk about, like, death is everywhere and we weren't originally supposed to die. So it does not feel good. And we long for something that we can no longer have in this life. And what was beautiful about the things that you were saying is this transition from tragedy to triumph. And so I watched you in your message share the pain over the loss, and it launched you into your message about, and these are the things happening now that shouldn't be happening. And that's one of the ways my life has been the same is, you look at the things that have happened, and yet you aren't willing to let it take you or your voice completely out. you find a way or are taught a way, usually it's in combination with others, to be able to transform that into something that's actually going to make things better. Um, so tomorrow I'm doing a speech. Actually, you'll be the first to like actually hear a part of the message, but it's only 3 minutes, very short. And the message that came up was the last day I saw my brother alive, and not knowing this, of course, and then when he died, and then my reconciliation with my own guilt and grief and even shame, and his message to the other people that have never met him that are going to hear it, because there's a message in what I experienced and what he experienced and what we're collectively together sharing with other people. And part of that journey has been workaholism for me. So a lot of our world will look at workaholism and just say, oh, you're really ambitious and you work hard. There is that in our world. There's a lot of ambition and drive and determination. But when I mention workaholism, what I really am saying is this addiction to not deal with your own pain and your own struggles, and then to busy yourself, nervous system wise, mind wise, activity wise, into all of these different things. And so what happened with me is very insidious. I unconsciously decided I wasn't going to deal with some of my own things through my adolescent years and young adulthood. That I got really busy, like so busy that at this point I hate the word busy. Like people are like, how are you doing today? Busy. I hate it. I hate it. Like, why is it the first thing we say? We're busy. Like it's a badge of honor of productivity. So I found myself full-blown workaholic. I neglected time with my family. I neglected time with God. I neglected time with friends. I basically didn't have any friends. I mean, I was friendly with people, but I didn't do anything. And endlessly working. And I was serving people. I was helping them heal, and yet not dealing with a lot of my own stuff. And for me, that led me to a place of really severe burnout, which again, a lot of the world will go, no, you just need a vacation. No, like I hit adrenal fatigue. My body couldn't do it anymore, even if I tried. I lost my spark, my passion, my identity. My body shut down. I couldn't lift up one leg after the other to go get my client. And in that time, I had seen some of the signs and symptoms and had been told by other people different things. And it didn't resonate. I didn't listen. It's one of the reasons I'm an advocate for therapies that go deeper than talk therapies, because we can run on this cognitive loop and it never change until we get, like Ken was saying, more subconscious below the surface and at the root of things, that then things can change. It's kind of like if there's a lot happening in the Jenga block, until we really get to the root of some of the things, it's still going to stay all wonky. And sometimes it's got to be knocked down to be rebuilt stronger. So I hit this place of severe burnout, and I knew some changes needed to happen. The first thing I did was I actually talked to my boss at the time, and I told her, I think I need some help. I don't know what. And they prescribed a vacation. So I took 7 days off and stayed at home and walked in the grass, and it was good. It did not solve my problem, because at the core of all this was also trauma. And I kept going in that way for a little while. They took my caseload got a little smaller, the hours a little bit less. And it helped me not get further into burnout, but it didn't solve my problem. So for self-care wise, at that time, is I legitimately worked less so that I could make space for myself to heal. Because time, we can't just poof, more time. We set aside time, and time exists. And that's the first thing I did in my self-care, is I started to look at time differently and set it in different ways. And I happened upon a really incredible therapist. You can picture a 70-year-old woman with 4-foot long hair, kind of hippy dippy, good, free flowing energy. And she encountered me, and she's like, do you want to meet later today? I offer a huge financial discount for people that work at the facility. And would you like to receive help? And at that time, I financially definitely needed the help. And I said yes, a lot like what Ken said. I said yes. And what I experienced was called thought field therapy. In a lot of the world, it's considered what's called EFT, so motion focused therapy, where it's acupressure points on the body and tapping in various places. Well, this is like that, but on steroids in a good way, because it actually gets you in that trauma thought field in the brain and the amygdala and the hippocampus. And it allows you, through the different algorithms you walk me through, to take the trauma memories from the parts of my brain that were making it alive and in the present to the memory storage section that didn't have to be triggered so much. And so that's the other thing I did for self-care is I went every single week, and I was willing to say, okay, this is the one that's coming up right now. My brother's overdose when he was clinically dead and brought back. Like, I'm in that thought field, and there's horror and terror and grief, and then receiving healing treatment. So professional therapy is one of the routes I needed to take. Not everybody needs that route. Some have an established herd community and resiliency in their nervous system and access to tools where they don't necessarily need someone professional. I did. And I engaged in that in quite a while. And then all these other blocks started to shift for self-care practices. I started to make room in my body to settle, because before you could picture like a body that's so wound up like this, and like nothing good happens from that, right? Like a body that's like this all the time, like doesn't sleep well and doesn't digest food well, and all the things. So I made space to start to slow down somatically, so in my body. And I found all kinds of things along the way. I found different like yoga stretching practices that helped heal my fascia. Meditation was something I attempted at the time. And for many trauma survivors, they think that they're just broken, but it's not that. I hated meditation because I would try and get quiet and my mind would scream. Like it would get more angry when I would meditate. So I couldn't take that route first. I was like, I want to quiet the mind, and it wasn't working. So then I over time found that I didn't just need to calm down. I had all of this energy in my body. Like my body actually held on to these memories, and it needed a discharge of like the physiology. You know, a lot of times with animals and people, when they're traumatized, they're shaking a lot. And if we stop the shaking, then we don't actually release the chemicals we need to say, okay, all that excess cortisol and adrenaline is like, it's moved through. I'm back to stabilization. I'm okay. I started to recognize I needed more of that. And so I found myself through exercise or running or walking, allowing this discharge of energy. I found horses, and like horses, all animals, but horses are also like God's gift to mankind, because when you're around a horse, there's something that happens. They don't have the same prefrontal cortex as us. So they can't lie, they can't like manipulate a situation, and their magnetic field, you were talking about frequencies, it's 5 times larger than people. So they command space. They have presence. And very simple stuff, like you're trying to lead a horse to go in a circle or give direction. If you aren't fully in your body and clear in your leadership, that horse is going to like tell you, because they want a healthy leader. And if you're not one, they are not going to listen. They don't want anything to do with you at that point. Or
I've heard a lot of stories on that, on how horses can tell what's going on inside your head. They can tell if you're approaching them, they can tell that you've got it all together. They can tell that you're a leader, and it will be very easy for you to get on a horse and command that horse because they feel like they're connected with you. It is so fascinating how horses have that innate sense.
Yeah, and other animals, like it's spectacular to watch them and to engage in relationship with them, because they access, like even us, when we were talking about our cats, like we're gushing about our cats. The animals, they do something to us. They like get inside our soul, and then we can access all these places we couldn't before. So for sure, horses, they've been a part of my self-care. Also, like they're a mirror, right? Like you're saying, Ken. So sometimes it's some tough therapy work when you're with horses, because you see things you didn't see before, and then you have that opportunity to work through. Another thing that like we understand when we talk about, but maybe not on the surface, is our actual natural environment. In the worst parts of my workaholism, I recognized that the only time outdoors and in the natural outdoors, I say that because right now I live in like the wild, wild west, you could say, like the far desert. There's still concrete and roads and things like that, but I'm really close to huge mountains and all the cactus and the wildlife. But previous to, I was in the suburbs. So when I walked out my door, I would see some grass. I mean, I'm Arizona. Grass doesn't really live very well unless you work really hard for it. But I'd see like the houses across the street, and then the freeway, and then my workplace, and then the freeway, and then my street. And that was like that for almost years. And like stark contrast to my childhood where I was running in the West Virginia mountains and climbing in creeks and like around all the trees. So it was such a stark contrast, but I found myself back in nature a whole lot more, like actually longing and realizing when my body was off, I'd say, wait, I have a lot of toxic pollutants in my body. Like I need to get out and get away so that I can actually be more present and whole. So one of my biggest self-care places is the river out where we're at. So the Salt River. And I'll do all kinds of things. Sometimes I'll just go and sit in the water and listen to the birds and watch the fish and do literally nothing. And it's magical. Like it's magical. Like nature is real medicine to the mind and the soul, but also to the body. Like it's designed to be our greatest co-regulator. Like we were talking about trees, right? Trees, they let off all this oxygen. And there was once I was kayaking down the river and it was their breeze. So it was like it was actually breathing and you could see it. And I could feel my body actually go, oh, because there's this connection that happens. So to answer your question, definitely community, definitely animals, the natural environment, doing the hard work in therapy, feeling safe with other people, and actually having more balance in my life. And we didn't talk any about faith, at least in this part of my journey, but when you and I and Ken were talking about some really big horrors that we actually see in our community and in our homes and in our families. And it can be life shaking to someone's core if they don't have a foundation for who they are and why they exist and what's next, all those things. And so I'd say that anchoring of really understanding that I do matter and I am loved and you matter and you are loved and all of this matters and it can be loved and should be loved. It helped me be able, like you said, to vibrate at that frequency. And so I choose that now. I've been known throughout the years. It's kind of hilarious, but the memory that comes up the most is a young man when I was in residential treatment, and he came up to me. It was probably 8 p.m. I was on what's called late night, so just supporting the kids as a therapist. And he comes up and he's like, "Miss, why do you always smile? Like what? Like I don't get it. Like why?" And I told him, I said, "Well, one, I've done my work, and so I willingly choose joy because I could choose another option, and I don't want to choose another option." And it's not toxic positivity, because sometimes people can fall in that, like, I'm just going to be happy all the time. And I'm like, you like suppress sadness and grief when it needs some expression. But I welcome honest feelings. But I kind of shared that, and then I said, the greatest thing that's ever been done has been done. Like somebody died because they love us so much. And so I'm going to lean into that. I'm going to lean into the fact that we're all created and we all matter. And that when we love on ourselves and love on other people, things are so much better. So much better.
Oh, there's so much gold in what you just shared, Kaleigh. I loved all that. And I can so relate because I've been such a workaholic myself to the point, and, I had trauma over relationships. I had the first one of the first main boyfriends I had, he, after a 4-year amazing relationship, one night he strangled me and almost killed me. And I was 22 years of age, and it absolutely traumatized me. And from that moment, I was like, I don't need a man for anything. And here I am at 50, never married, no kids, had a few part-time relationships along the way. But, there was some serious trauma over relationships and intimacy. Like, I shut down big time. I can relate to that horse of yours that closed down its heart, I could relate to that. And I see this happen a lot nowadays, where people have been hurt and they've been hurt and they've been hurt, and they keep going out, they keep opening up and getting hurt. And then it becomes like almost an expected thing. It's like, well, if you open yourself to love, of course you're going to get hurt. Like, that's just how it goes. The more love you feel, the more pain you're going to feel potentially. Right. And so I've been very similar to you. I've been such a workaholic. It's been insane. And I have had to slow down. The last few years, I have had to, because I've had burnout several times, and the burnout shows up in near-death experiences for me. That's how it's shown up. I had a quinsy in my throat one year where I almost died with my, quinsy is like a bad form of tonsillitis. Like you get an abscess on your tonsil, and your throat can swell. And within a few days, if you don't deal with it, your airways shut off and you die. So that happened one year. I was emceeing at the Woodford Folk Festival, and this throat, I just thought it was a cold, and it just got worse and worse. And then my throat started to swell. And then I was in emergency ward at Brisbane Hospital for 3 days over New Year's Eve 1 year. That was one near-death experience. Last year, I got swept out to sea in the ocean. And I think that was God's way, or that was the universe's way of also telling me to slow down and to also say, go with the flow. And, there was a lot of learnings in that experience where I was swept a kilometre out to sea and could have easily have drowned or got taken by a shark. Last year as one. That was when I came back to shore. It was like pressing the reset button on my life. And that, there's many warning signs that often with a lot of people, it shows up a dis-ease in some way in the body. For me, often I would get sick, I would get colds, flus, all that kind of thing. Many different ways that it's shown up for me. Sciatica. I had a tetanus shot 30 years ago, and I've had sciatica down that same side of my body ever since. Hence why I didn't get the jab, and hence why I'm very skeptical of any jabs of whatsoever, of anyone coming anywhere near me with a needle. I'm very, very, not into that at all. And so for me, I've had to learn. I've got involved in a lot of women's circles. Yoga has been massive for me. Meditation, which I was never good at meditating. And similar to you, I would get frustrated. There would be all these conversations in my mind, or I'd fall asleep. That's how it would go for meditation. I'm like, this is just not working for me. Clearly I can't meditate. However, it's something you can practice, and even just a few minutes of mindful meditation or guide. I like to do just 5 to 10 minutes. I do a guided meditation most mornings, not every morning, most mornings. And I use an app called Insight Timer, which I find very good. And I just put a 5-10 minute meditation on there. I do beach walks now. In fact, this morning I did a 90-minute beach walk. I had a swim in the ocean, and, from 6 to 9 a.m. I took that time out, then had a nice coffee at my local cafe. Made that time for me. It's when people are emailing you, messaging you, that's their to-do list. You must make time for this self-care. Otherwise, you will just work like a crazy person. And for those who are glued to their phones nowadays, how addicted are we to our phones? So now with social media, there's all this social anxiety and this addiction to technology. And really, if you worked out how many hours a day do you spend on your phone, it would probably blow your mind. What did we do back in the day when there were no mobile phones, when there was no social media, which is only 20 years ago? And now it's like everything is speeding up. Now it's like time is going like that. It's like, it's not like our days are going. I feel like my day goes like that. I feel like I wake up sometimes. Next thing I know, it's time to go to bed. Right. And then it's like Groundhog Day. Then next day, okay, wake up. Okay, time to go to bed. All right. It's kind of like, and I mean, how many of these days do we get into life? You think a third of people die by 65, 90% of people die with regrets, and the years just keep on ticking by. So I think getting clear on your purpose, I think, is so important. And, Bob Proctor, the late, great Bob Proctor, at 84 years of age, he was asked, there's a YouTube video, you can go and look it up, how to find your purpose. And he said, his answer was, do what you love. As much as possible, do what you love, which of course is coming to joy. It's coming to peace. It's coming to gratitude. It's all those high vibration states. And, you know, the more we can do that, of course, we're going to go up and down this scale, the Dr. Hawkins scale of consciousness. It's not, you know, it's not, I don't believe, a normal state for human beings, or not the way we know our lives anyway, to be constantly on a high and peaceful all the time. We're going to have curveballs. You know, just before the show, my cat threw up. Okay, I'm not going to leave that cat vomit at the side of the screen for the whole time of the show. No, it's like, one moment, I'll just clean up the cat vomit. Okay, you know, these things happen, right? You know, it's part of life. So finding that time, making that time for self-care, I think is so important. I think it's so common where people become workaholics or they become addicted to substances. Very, very common. Escaping the trauma through drug addiction, through alcohol addiction, smoking, etc. And the minute we can get conscious to, okay, I'm shutting down from trauma or whatever. The minute we get conscious to it and we actually own it without making ourselves wrong about it, you know, just going, okay, it is what it is. You know, it's just how it is right now. We can't control anything in the past. We can be committed to what we want for the future, not be attached. I love that distinction I got in Landmark. Be committed, not attached to what you want in life, because it will throw curveballs. You are going to get unexpected things like ant poison at your door, which could kill your dog, right? You're going to get unexpected stuff will happen in life, things we can't control. All we can do is do our best to control what we can control, to have the best lives that we can, and for that ripple effect to then flow on to others, for us all to ideally have the best possible life we can in this current 3D plane that we're in. A lot of people are now talking about going 5D or going super conscious, sixth sense, and tapping into soul and spirit. And this is where I think faith is so important also with dealing with trauma, having faith. Now, I'd love to talk to you more about that, Kaleigh, because I know you're a very faith-rich person. Has that been quite a journey for you too? Have you always been a strong lady of faith, or is it something you've also learned over time?
You know, I was blessed really early of having a divine experience with the Holy Spirit and Jesus himself when I was 4. And I don't remember many other memories around that time, but that one. And, you know, it's one of those, when you grow up with painful experiences, kids, they internalize. It's one of the most common things I hear is they blame themselves, because it's, you know, they're in that stage of development where if something breaks in the other room, you think, oh, I did it, right? So it's just like that connection. And so I was in church and, you know, hated myself and was stuck in that shame prison. Like you said, it vibrates at the lowest frequency. And it was through music, the song Jesus Loves Me. And it was like, I was so seen and so heard and so loved. It was transcended even spirituality. It was like in the present moment, but the biggest thing you could ever experience. And from then, I think that's what saved my life, really. I think that's what led to me not completing suicide or me not falling into other addictions, because I had this understanding enough of my identity and that I was loved, even if I didn't feel that way all the time. And, you know, I watch with the people I serve sometimes not have that. And it's been what's led to those really close calls in their life, when they're like, I don't know who I am. I don't know any of that. Like, the trauma can strip someone's identity, and then it can, you know, pare it down to this belief that they're no good or unlovable or not worth anything. And that undoing that, when it's at deep roots, it's challenging for people, but I'm so blessed and honored that I get to walk with people in that. But yeah, so from 4 on, I had that anchoring point. I had different times in church. I was also blessed, I think, that most of the churches that I went to weren't rigidly dogmatic or oppressive. There wasn't this severe legalism that we see in a lot of Christianity and branches of Christianity, where it's, you have to be good enough to be loved by God, or you have to do all the things. And that just, again, reinforces shame, because just like everybody else, like, I suck sometimes, like, I make bad decisions sometimes, and I know that. And so if I have to be good enough to earn love and salvation, then I'm screwed. Like, there's no way I could possibly do it. So I was blessed that I didn't experience religious trauma. and had a personal relationship with God himself, and felt safe in that, and knew that he wasn't, the other thing, because of, I think, some of the church experiences that I had, I knew that he wasn't the originator of the bad things that happened to me. Like, he didn't want those things in the beginning. He didn't want me as his kid or any of his other children to have to experience profound loss and pain and suffering and disconnection. He actually says, like, we don't want those things. So yeah, I walked with him and had this anchoring piece, but I also, a lot of times I would say, I was still scared of not being good enough, and I lost my my daily walk. So he was there, and I would pray or I would go to him, but I wasn't in the Word. I wasn't in fellowship with other people. I was busy, 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 busy. I neglected everything. So when I came back to that, it really was the experiences with my brothers, where, when you are loving someone in addiction and you truly don't know if they're going to live or die from one moment to the next, like, or someone's suicidal, you don't know. And you realize that you truly are powerless to their decisions. Like, I could lock a family member up in the room, but I can't control them breaking out of the room and hurting themselves. And so I reconciled with that really early on. And, when my youngest brother died but came back to life, I turned to God and I was like, God, just be with me, be with me. When my dad was going into surgery for the second time, emergency, again, I was like, Lord, just be with me. And without that, I don't know how I would have navigated it, to be honest, the way that I did. I don't know. And then after the death of my middle brother, I think the real saving grace I have is this idea of mercy. My middle brother experienced tremendous adversity. He was born a female and then transitioned to a male, and in all of that, experienced a lot of hate, and some even in the Christian community. And he looked at that and he went, well, I want nothing to do with a God that's like that then, and had turned away for quite some time. And he really fell into other kinds of challenges and pain and suffering. And kind of near the end, he was turning back to questions of like, wait, okay, so God's not like that. Or, I am feeling better in my body and in my life, and us getting to have some really amazing times together. And I looked at his death and I went, I think it's mercy, because even though he came to know he was loved enough, he still had so many decades of trauma in his mind and body. And then also identifying as transgender, he didn't really feel safe. And then in the United States, there's a lot of hate, and there's been some pretty significant tragedies for people that identify different. And he was scared. He got scared of some of those things. And so I think my faith in that time, and having deep conversations with God, and God assuring me, no, like, your brother's okay, and please don't wish him back on this planet, because he's in a way more peaceful place than being on this, like, godforsaken place right now. Like he wouldn't want you to bring him back here. There's a lot of pain and trauma going on here. Did that solve my grief? No. Like, I still experience grief, and that's required me to tend to my grief. One of the things I say with grief is it's not something to fix, it's something to tend to. It's like a little baby. You're not going to tell a little baby, well, get it together, like, don't cry. It's going to cry because it's sad or hungry or hurts. And so I have grief come up, and then I take good care of that, and I run into the arms of my loving Heavenly Father, and he's always there. It doesn't mean that the trauma ends, because, like you said earlier, there's purpose in our pain and our challenges. Like, I wouldn't be here in front of you if I hadn't walked through fire a lot of different times. And so with those things, I say thank you, God, and all the people and animals and the environment that walked with me to get to here.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think faith is so important because often people do feel so alone. And the thing is, we're never alone when you're connected with Source or with God or whatever you want to call it. We're never alone. We always have spirit here. We always, often many spirits. People say angels, or I believe our ancestors are with us as well. I feel the presence of my ancestors often. And you're never alone. And so this is the thing, is having some kind of faith, I think, is so important, and being able to deal with those emotions so important. We have tear ducts for a reason, right? If you feel like crying, then cry. If you feel like screaming, then scream. You don't have to be nasty to anyone else. And actually, what happened with me from a young age, my dad always said anger is danger, and I internalized my anger, which I realized many years later led to depression. I had some really dark periods through my life and was self-harming for many years, drinking a lot, doing drugs, smoking, doing all that stuff for so many years, totally off the rails. What I was actually doing is I was attempting to kill myself slowly. I didn't want to just, slit my wrists or hang myself. I was doing it slowly by drinking, smoking, drugs, and all the other harmful ways I was doing it. Very, very self-destructive things. However, it's all brought me to this point to speak up about this stuff now, because I can now speak from experience. And whatever your faith is, we have all these different religions, but I do believe they're all tapping into the one God. I think it's one God, one universal energy. People just have different stories around it. That's my belief. Now, Ken, I know that faith is huge for you as well. In fact, so much so that it's part of your business now. Can you share your journey with faith and how that's helped you through life, and particularly with your traumas?
My gosh, that's quite a story. So before I get into that story, I've got to say, so when you were talking about jabs and the fact that you don't, you question all the jabs now, any kind, it brought me back to a phobia that I've always had. So even from from being a kid to present day, I still have a phobia of needles. And I got to thinking about that. I'm like, maybe that's an innate sense that God has put in me to stay away from all that stuff, because I've always had a phobia. Even when my mom gets like a cortisone shot in her knee, I have to walk out of the room because I cannot stand the sight. Yeah. So, it just kind of hit me in the moment. I'm like, maybe God put that in me in the very beginning to keep me from that stuff. Who knows? I don't know. But it's just, I've always had a fear around needles. It's just always been one of those things. But anyhow, so when it comes to faith, I do believe that there is one way, one truth, and one life. No one comes to the Father but through Christ. I believe Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. So much so, it's here's one point I'll make. Isn't it interesting how in the mainstream, the one thing that's always attacked, it's not Catholics, it's not Jews, it's not Mormons, it's not Jehovah's Witnesses, it's not the New Age people. The one thing that is always attacked in mainstream and worldwide is what? Christianity. It's Christ. You must ask the question, why? Why is that? What is it about what is it about Christ? What is it about that message that they do not like? Maybe it's because it's the one message where you have a God who cared enough about his people to come down on earth and become a human himself and live the life that the law required, the law of the Bible, so the 10 Commandments, which we could never, that was the whole purpose of the 10 Commandments, to prove that we cannot do that. The 10 Commandments weren't put there as a condemnation tool. It was put there to show that man cannot do it without God. So, in order to save us, God came down and became that example for us, became that sacrifice for us. He lived the perfect, sinless life that we could not live. Then died as that sacrifice, took on the price of that sin for us, and then not only died, but the more powerful thing about it is he rose again on the third day, now making him not just a sacrifice, but an eternal sacrifice for our sins. That's the God I serve. That is the God that I believe in. It is not a God that where there's a person standing on a corner, you're going to hell if you don't accept Christ. No, that's the wrong message. And I don't think that that helps anyone. And you'll never hear that from me. Christ crucified. He died. He rose again. And now he is the eternal sacrifice for your sin. If you are his child and you accept him into your heart, you recognize that you're a sinner and you accept him into your heart, and you choose to follow his path, that doesn't mean a self-improvement path, a checklist of things you've got to improve on and things you've got to do. That's not what it's about either. It means living your life and looking at it in a way of taking different circumstances that come into your life and go, okay, how does the gospel apply to this? What is God teaching me through this? What is God trying to show me about himself through this? That is what the Christian life looks like. Not a list of things to do, not condemnation, not judgment. Now, do Christians fall into that aspect of judgment? Yes. And unfortunately, I apologize for anybody who's experienced that wrongdoing and judgment. And there are Christians out there that are more concerned with, there are Christian churches out there, rather, that are more concerned with money. That is also not the Christian God that I serve. That is not. And so, I mean, I'm here to testify for that. For anybody who may be listening, who might be, maybe thinking about it, but maybe you've experienced that. Maybe you've been a part of a church that's more concerned about money. Maybe you've been a part of a church that's more concerned about these things and not the relationship. I'm here to tell you that is not the true gospel, Christ God. And so had to get on that bandwagon for a minute there just to kind of speak to that. But that's what my faith stands for. And my faith, time and time again, when I have been facing trials or circumstances or things that I've been just very stressed and worried about, time and time again, he's come through to me. Sometimes he's come through in a way that I did not want. But again, it's not necessarily about me. But now looking back on hindsight, as I look at the way he came through, even though it wasn't the way I wanted him to come through, it was the best way that he could have done it. And looking back on hindsight, that's when you usually see those kind of things. And he has been a very faithful God. It doesn't matter what, even my mom's a Christian as well, even in tight circumstances and tight financial circumstances, God has always made sure we are provided for. We still eat good. We still have a roof over our head. We have cars we can drive. I've got 3 different gyms that I go to. I'm freaking spoiled compared to most people. And yet we still complain when finances get tight, but God still provides. He still provides. He still provides. So through that journey, through my life, I mean, if I were to sit here and just blurt out everything that he's done, we would be here forever. So, I mean, That's just kind of like a nutshell. Like that's who he is to me. He is my life force. He is my hope. He is the solid rock that I stand on. He is my solid foundation. Even after the whole lovely summer of 2020 event happened, and for a while there, I was very confused with a lot of messaging that was coming out. And thank God I had a friend that woke me up and red-pilled me around everything. But even after that happened, there's still just so many, because we've got the internet and information is just like flowing at everybody so much. And there is really legitimately an awakening going on right now, both spiritually and geopolitical, if you will. There's a great awakening going around a lot of things. And even sometimes through that, I've kind of gone off trail, like on like maybe a belief that's like closer to like a little bit new agey, you know, and stuff like that, because I'm a lot more open to things now. He has always been faithful to bring me back to him. I've always sought him and said, you know, Lord, I need your guidance through this. I'm kind of in the weeds here. What about this and what about that? He's always been faithful to bring me back to him and keep me close to him. And so I can speak to so much. But I mean, I'm hoping I've given a good nutshell answer to your, what you threw out there, Aldwyn.
Yes, thank you. I can hear your devotion there, Ken. That's wonderful. You've been like evangelistic the whole way. Good on you. I love that. I love your passion. We've got RM Ramesh Rajput. Good to see you there on Facebook. Hallelujah. He says, hallelujah. Absolutely. Hallelujah. I love your faith and I love your conviction, Ken. I absolutely love that. We've got lots of people here on Instagram as well. We've got Brad Rayner. Good to see you. Carla Ann Fosbray. Michael Maloof. Good to see you. Robert Mull. Tristan Devaris, Atuna, and Karen Clark. Good to see their Clarkashians on Instagram, wherever you're joining us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us live today. We are just about to wrap. So before we do wrap, Kaleigh, do you have any final words around our topic today, the truth about trauma, you'd like to share?
I'm just glad that we're having this conversation, because it's the most important thing, is to have honest conversations with other people in ways like this, because we have puzzle pieces for each other, whether it comes to faith, what's happening in our environment, what's happening in our body. So share with people, find some tribe people for you, and develop healing in your heart.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you today. And for those who want to work with you or connect with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so on the website's the best way. It has all the ways to contact me, from email to call, all those things. They can certainly work with me in person, but one of the primary things I do is I lift others. And so I'm fixing broken systems. So there's ways to also support the mission. So they can check out the website, some horses, some people, inspiring stories. I'm going to be downloading even more stories as I launch starting October 20th, about people's real stories of healing, so that there is more hope poured out into the world, and they can share some of the things like we shared about today. So that's Shine, as in like shine, His, as in HIS, light. It's got to be light, everybody. And then LLC, as in business.com, shinehislightllc.com.
Beautiful. Love that, Kaleigh. And do you have a favorite quote or motto you'd like to share with us today?
I do. I'm so glad you asked. Okay. I didn't realize this when I was a teenager, that this was literally my mission in life and life first. But then when I thought about it with adult eyes, I went, oh my God, God told me all along what I was supposed to do. So it's Psalm 82, 3-4, and it's defend the cause of the weak and the fatherless, uphold the rights of the poor and oppressed. And I always mix up the last because there's different versions, but it's, I think, deliver them from the hand of the wicked and rescue the needy. And so essentially, God teaches us that we are to look out for our brothers and sisters. We are not to leave them behind. And when something is going on, we need to deliver and defend, encourage and help them and love them, because they matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that, Kaleigh. Thank you so much. It was absolutely wonderful chatting with you today. It's amazing what you've been through. Very inspiring story. You are yourself a great example of someone who has come through great trauma, and you've turned out okay on the other side, right? So there is light at the end of the tunnel, my friends. If you're feeling the trauma right now, then it's okay. We all go through it at some point in different ways. Everyone's story is different. It doesn't matter. It's all trauma in some level, right? So the minute you get conscious to it, the minute you can shift it, and it's okay. You are good enough. You are loved. You're not alone. Okay. And there's lots of help out there. So just seek support if you're feeling a bit low, or maybe practice a little bit of self-care. Now over to you, Ken. How can people connect with you?
You can connect with me through my website, which is, well, actually, it's a special page that I've developed on my website, and it's www.mastery, the way it sounds, weight, the way it sounds, loss.com. /connect. You can't get any more simpler than that, people. So basically, if you haven't caught on to it, I mean, I've thrown a couple hints here and there, but I am a faith-based weight loss coach. I've lost 62.5 pounds and I've kept it off for 6+ years now, easily, sustainably, all without a diet. And so that's what I teach my clients to do, to master their weight and health goals through a 7-part framework that I use, applying Christian principles and helping people to then achieve mastery and sustainably keeping their weight off for good, all without a diet, having that be sustainable. So on my website, www.masteryweightloss.com/connect, at the top, you are going to find a link to a mini boot camp educational series that I'm running right now. In this mini boot camp, I am giving away my 3 secrets to literally help you drop that last 20 pounds, to help you break those sugar addictions, to help you break through those hunger issues, and all of that. I am giving away those 3 powerful secrets. You're going to be, number 1, equipped with an empowered mindset shift. Number 2, you're going to be equipped with the ability to spot the industry lies and avoid the common pitfalls. Number 3, lastly, you'll be equipped to see past the marketing deceptions that this industry uses. They make you think what you're buying at the store in that package or box is healthy and it's a good choice, but really it's not. And you're buying it in the deception. So I teach you how to break through all of that, all in just 3 one-on-one sessions with me. You get booklets with it, you get the recordings with it, all of it. And all of that's going for an extremely low price. And I really don't know how long I'm going to keep this price up. Word is by the end of the year, beginning of the new year, the price is going up. So just keep that in mind. But right now, all of that's going for $75. You can find that on my Connect page. And then also, you're also going to find another link towards the bottom where you can connect with me on YouTube. Go subscribe to my YouTube channel. Brand new channel. I've got a ton of content already on there. It's really amazing. So my quote for today, there's 2 I'm actually going to share. So one is straight from the Word of God. And this is Psalm 46. Verses 1-3. God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth gives away, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and though the mountains tremble with swelling. And then I'm going to skip down to verse 10. Be still. Speaking to those in trauma, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I'm God. I really want that to sink in. Know that I'm God, not me, but know that He is God, meaning He is all-knowing, He's in control, and He's got you. He knows your pain. He wants to help you. So that's what I'll share there. And then lastly, I got one more I got to share. I cannot resist because this is just so powerful. Here's another quote. It's by an unknown author. Trauma may be a part of your story, but it doesn't have to be a part of your identity. All right. With that, over to you, Aldwyn.
Thank you, Ken. That's great. And RM Ramesh Rajput says, Amen. Amen. He's asking, brother and sister, how I can contact with you. You can contact with us on the links we have just shared. And I'm about to share my link now. Thank you so much, RM Ramesh. Lovely to see you there. Let us know where you're joining us from too, wherever you are in the world. There's this fly going around my face, as it does, as life throws these curveballs and flies at you sometimes. It's all right. I've cleaned up the cat vomit. So I know they're not coming to the cat vomit because it's all cleaned up. But it's telling me it's time to wrap up the show because we do tend to do epic shows here at Total Truth Show. And it's like, right, time to move along. For those who have joined us live on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, wherever you've joined us, wherever you're tuning in right now, let us know what's something you've got out of this show today. What's something you've learned, maybe a gem you've picked up. Share it in the comments so we can all stay present to the amazing wisdom shared in this show. For those who do want to connect with me, like RM Ramesh, he says, thanks so much, RM Ramesh. I love that name. That's very cool. Here we are back to Linktree, it's the ADHD, right? Yes, I have been diagnosed, like Ken has ADHD. We get very sidetracked. Anyway, back to the link here. Linktree/Aldwyn is where you'll find all my links, linktr.ee/Aldwyn, ALDWYN. Now, in there, you're going to find we have this amazing event called Stop Toxic Fire Ant Program. It's a beautiful community event. We've got a film called Pulse of Life, which is very much a David Attenborough style animal documentary and showing what happens when the poisons go in the waterways, etc., done by Lynn Sutherland, who is my co-host. She's a local filmmaker here. She's had her films in TV productions and TV shows around the world. She's extraordinary. We've got her Pulse of Life documentary is going to be playing, and then we have a speaker panel with some amazing experts. We're going to be raising awareness about what is going on with the government's poisoning program of Australia, all animals, the ecosystem, and the water supplies, if you let it. Okay, so we are adamant that we are going to shift this and stop this toxic fire ant program. And you can come and join in and come and find out more about it and learn, not just bury your head in the sand as so many people have over so many issues. How about pop your head out of that sand and actually go, wow, this is a reality. Okay, might be a reality you may not like, but this is the reality whether you like it or not. And in fact, burying your head in the sand and resisting, what will happen is these realities will persist until the point where you have a big awakening. So you either wake up now in small doses or you wake up big time later, because that's what happens in life. You either get the learnings with the brick or the feather, the brick, or the Mack truck, right? The feather, the brick, or the Mack truck is the way you're going to get hit in life with these learnings. And I suggest the sooner that you get the learnings, the better. So come along there October 20 at Currumbin RSL Club here on the Gold Coast. We are going to be live streaming the event as well. So stay tuned on socials for the live stream details. And also for those who haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, Aldwyn Altuney Media Queen TV, you can see it right there on the screen. Then subscribe there. We've got over 1,300 videos on there now, all sorts of inspiring content, some great comedies there, which is another great way you can deal with your trauma, is to have a good laugh, right? Yeah. Have a good laugh. Watch some of those comedies in there. I put some of my favorites in there, and one of them is Stop It. Okay, so Stop It. Watch the Stop It documentary, or the little 5-minute skit in there, 5 minutes on Stop It.
I've seen that one. It's so hilarious. I had a friend show that to me a while back. It's so funny that you actually have it, because I think I know what it is.
It is absolutely hilarious. I have seen it probably 50 times. Every time I just cack myself laughing. And it really is as simple as that. We can make life as hard or as simple as we choose to. And whatever you say and whatever you believe will be true for you. So tune in there. All my links there at Linktree. I've got my YouTube channel, a whole lot of my Facebook groups. Conscious Community Global is another great one. We've got some great resources in that one, and all my other socials. Just check it out. Check out the press release we've done. If you want to know more details about this toxic Australian government $1.2 billion poisoning program of the country and of all the people and animals in it, then check out the press release. That'll tell you a whole lot more information. And check out Save the Bees Australia, because that's who we're raising funds for. They're doing a great job. Without the bees, we have no produce. We're going to go to genetically modified food, which we know that's the agenda being pushed, is all the toxic, more toxic food and genetically modified meat and all that kind of stuff. So get aware, so get informed, so you can take empowered action. And my quote for today, is let yourself go through it when it comes to trauma. Okay? Don't try to paint it anything other than what it is. Be there for yourself with no judgment. Be there for yourself with no judgment. Learn to be your own best friend. Okay, you are there with yourself from the very beginning. You are there with yourself at the end. And it is an absolute pleasure to share this time with you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Kaleigh. You've been an amazing guest today. It's been extraordinary. Thank you, Ken. Always a pleasure. Episode 82. We've been together now longer than a lot of marriages, actually, Ken, and we've never actually met in person. Maybe this is why it's worked so well, Ken, all these years, because we've never actually met in person.
Maybe.
We're at a safe distance, but it's not because of social distancing, let me tell you. It's just the way it is. One day we will meet in person.
One day we will meet in person. I'm sure of that. And I will give you a giant hug.
We will. We will. Sending much love to everyone who's tuned in. Thank you so much. Thank you once again, Kaleigh. Check out Kaleigh's stuff. Check out Ken's stuff. Check out my stuff. Stay connected. You are not alone. We are here for you. We're in this together. Let's go forward. Have the most extraordinary life. Thank you so much for joining us here on Total Truth Show. We'll be back with more amazingness very soon. Bye for now. Bye.